Hello there, this is Sam, and I'd like to start off this episode with a quote, and the source of this quote might surprise you. The most important things are the hardest to say. They're the things you get ashamed of, because words diminish them. Words shrink things that seemed limitless when they were in your head, to no more than living size when they're brought out. But it's more than that, isn't it? The most important things lie too close to wherever your secret heart is buried, like landmarks to a treasure your enemies would love to steal away. And you may make revelations that cost you dearly, only to have people look at you in a funny way, not understanding what you've said at all, or why you thought it was so important that you almost cried while you were saying it. That's the worst, I think, when the secret stays locked within, not for want of a teller, but for want of an understanding ear. So I read this recently and I loved it so much and I wanted to share it. And in fact, the writer of that particular piece was Stephen King, which surprised me when I heard it. This is Sam, and this is episode 45 of the VictorPrep Vocab podcast. Our previous words were sacrosanct, hegemony, salient, and intractable. Sacrosanct meant something that is regarded as being too important or too valuable to be interfered with or altered. Hegemony, that means leadership or dominance, usually by one social group over another social group or one country over another country. Salient, that means the most noticeable thing, or important. And our last word was intractable. That means hard to control or deal with. So now it's time for our new words, and our first new word is metamorphosis. Metamorphosis, it's a noun, and it's spelled Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. And this may sound familiar for anyone who's ever studied biology, but metamorphosis means the transformation of something from an immature form to an adult form. Usually there's multiple stages in that. So the classic example is a tadpole turning into a frog or a toad. Of course, metamorphosis doesn't just apply to animals, but people or things as well. So you could say Arnold Schwarzenegger went through a metamorphosis. He moved to America as a young, aspiring bodybuilder, and then he experienced a metamorphosis by becoming a movie star and then becoming a politician, because obviously that's a big change. And when you use metamorphosis to apply to anything, the change is usually a big change. It's usually something has changed into something completely different. So a small change you wouldn't normally describe as being a metamorphosis. It means that there was a big change. So you could think of Bruce Banner, the scientist, turning into the Hulk in the comic book. That is a metamorphosis. It's a big change. But you could also describe someone's personality as going through a metamorphosis. If you had someone who was incredibly shy and then they became a famous actor who was bold, that's a metamorphosis of their personality. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing. Some synonyms are transformation, mutation, alteration, change, and transformation. Our second word is elicit. Elicit. That's spelled E-L-I-C-I-T. Now, be aware with this word, there's another word that sounds exactly the same that has a very different meaning. Elicit, beginning with an E, E-L-I-C-I-T, elicit, means to evoke or draw out. There's another word, illicit, that's I-L-L-I-C-I-T, that means illegal or forbidden. We're talking about illicit meaning to draw out from someone, So, our meaning of elicit: imagine a teacher who's trying to encourage some students to answer a question. And she's saying, oh, someone must have an answer. Can someone answer this question, please? That teacher is trying to draw out an answer from the students. They're trying to elicit an answer. Some synonyms are obtain, draw out, extract, bring out, evoke, call forth, bring forth. So, if you're trying to encourage someone to say something or do something, you're trying to elicit a response. In the same way, if someone is trying to goad someone into a violent reaction, you could say they're trying to elicit a violent reaction. For example, if you're teasing someone because you want them to get angry, you are trying to elicit a response from them. I don't advise that, by the way, that's not cool. But anyway, just an example. An example would be if you want to elicit a groan from your kids, if you have kids, you might make a cheesy dad joke, and that will elicit some sort of response from the kids. Anyway, our third word is maverick. Maverick. It's spelled M-A-V-E-R-I-C-K. Maverick. A maverick, for this is a noun, is an unorthodox or independent person. So, if you imagine one of your friends or someone you know who is very different, they do things their own way, they don't try and fit in with the crowd, you could describe that person as a maverick. The classic example, especially for those who saw this movie when they were younger, like me actually, is Top Gun. And obviously there's a character called Maverick, played by Tom Cruise, who, surprisingly enough, is somewhat of a maverick. He's very independent, he does his own thing, he doesn't listen to his bosses, he does crazy flybys by the tower. You have to see the movie, I suppose. But anyway, we loved it when we were kids. We pretended to be airplanes in the playground. But anyway, Maverick, i.e. Tom Cruise in that movie, acts like a maverick. And he's an individualist, a free spirit, you might say somewhat eccentric. And these are all synonyms of maverick. So think of someone you know who would be a maverick. Perhaps it's yourself. And our final word for today is cacophonous. Cacophonous. That's spelled C-A-C-O-P-H-O-N-O-U-S. This word is an adjective, and it means involving or producing a harsh, raucous, jarring mixture of sounds. So imagine a really terrible high school band are playing outside of your window and they're all playing the wrong notes at the same time, and it's just a hideous noise. That is a cacophonous noise. Now, cacophonous usually means that there's a variety of different sounds all meshing together. So you don't usually describe a single person who's a bad singer as producing a cacophonous sound. It usually almost always means there's many different sounds that together sound discordant, they don't mesh well together, it's producing an awful noise in aggregate. So that's the usage there. And some synonyms are splitting, noisy, loud, raucous, discordant, dissonant, jarring, grating, unmusical, maybe. So the noun form of cacophonous is cacophony. And if you imagine you're at the airport, there's sounds of planes, there's a baby crying, there's someone drilling in the street with one of those pneumatic drills, and all of these sounds are blending together, you could say that would be a cacophony. So those were our words for today. I'll just briefly cover those again. Our first word was metamorphosis. That means the process of transformation from one thing, usually into something quite different. For example, a tadpole into a frog. There's a big change there. It's a metamorphosis. but it can also mean someone's personality changing, or the weather changing, or some other thing changing a lot. Elicit, that means to evoke or draw out, usually drawing out a response or answer from someone in reaction to something you said. Maverick, that means an independent or free-spirited type person. And our final word was cacophonous. Cacophonous, that means involving or producing a harsh sound, usually some horrible mixture of other sounds put together. Now, here are our test sentences. Try and work out which word I'm referring to in each sentence. Jane wasn't only free-spirited, but she was a pure original. We never knew what she was going to do next. I watched the caterpillar from his days inching along leaves to when he emerged from his chrysalis as a beautiful moth. The teacher tried hard to encourage the shy pupil to speak up in class, but to little result. I couldn't sleep last night because of the awful wailing of cats outside my window. So gang, those were our words for today. Hope you found those quite easy. As always, I'm available to email at sam.fold@gmail.com and on Twitter @samfold, although I'm the worst Twitterer in the world. I don't tweet that much, and it may be a while before I even realise you've tweeted at me. So I spend a lot of time reading books and not looking at the internet. So anyway, please do email me, give me your feedback. I read them all and respond to them slowly because I do get quite a lot of emails about the podcast. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I will speak to you next time.